Hello and welcome back to another daily cribbage. We are playing the computer and taking it nice and easy. So, computer's cut 8. What's the chance we beat that? 100%. Alright, so we are pawn, we have the dealer to begin with, and we start off with triple jack 10, which looks great. It allows us to throw away 7-8, which is one of our favorite things to throw away because it improves the runs and it's worth 15 points already. Opponent plays a 9 and it looks like we have to play one of our jacks. So in this case we're going to play the jack of diamonds because the jack of diamonds is the same suit as our other card, 10 of diamonds. And so there's a chance that we get to fake the flush a little bit more, which gives our opponent a bit harder time reading our hand. Of course, we fully expect our opponent to play a 10 if they have one and get 3 points for the run. Now, the fact that they didn't play a 10 means that they don't have a 10, because a 10, it would have been just a good card for our opponent to play. They're getting 3 points for the run. So we can confidently lead our 10. We expect our opponent to have some 5s because our opponent's played 9, 6, 4, and a 5 makes a lot of sense. Opponent doesn't have any 2s either. They would have played that otherwise. So because 2, 4, 9 is a combo for 15, so that's one of the things that we would expect. Opponent doesn't have any aces, so they have a 9, which is great for us. We would have always got those 3 points for the run. And let's see, we've got 7 points, 1 extra point for our jack of diamonds, and the 7 cut's good for us because it makes 6 points. Opponent throwing away king 10 there, very reasonable discard. Our opponent also had a discard of king 4, keeping the 9, double 9, 10. Okay. So we're a little bit ahead of where we usually are on average, and our opponent's a little bit behind where they would be. Expect to get about 10 points as pawn. And we've made our first milestone, although I tend to ignore the first milestone. It's easy to miss and it's easy to make up a lot of points over the course of the game. So when we look at this hand, we've got 3, 6, 8, double 9, king. 6, double 9 is a good combo, and we're almost certainly going to keep that together, which means that we're left to discard either 3, 8, 3, king, or 8, king. The king is not really comboing it with anything, so that's the thing we're probably going to get rid of almost always. No reason to keep the king. And so the question is, do we want to keep the 3 or the 8? Well, the 8 is... so first of all, the 3 is a low card, and low cards are generally good because there are more ways for them to make 15. For instance, in this particular case, it's a little bit harder because all of our cards are multiples of 3 in that case, having 3, 6, 9, 9. That means that the only way to make 15 with those cards is to have another multiple of 3. So a 3, 6, or a 9 is the only way to make more 15s. And if we want to be using the 3, we'd have to get either a 3 or a 6. But if we do get a 3 or a 6, it's worth a lot of points. So any 3 is going to take us up to 12 points, and any 6 is going to take us up to 14 points, because we got double 6, double 9 is 12, plus 3 double 6 is another 15. And in the other case, if we cut a 3, then double 3, double 9 is worth 8 points, and then the 6, 9, 6, 9 gives us another 4 points, so 12. That's just how I count it, but do take your time if you're new to counting out those points. They can be confusing. So those are quite good, but keeping the 8 instead of the 3 might be a little bit better. Why is that? Well, if we cut a 7, then our hand is worth 16 points, and there were no ways to get 16 points if we held the 3. And if we cut a 10, then our hand is worth 12 points, which is also pretty good. those are the main cuts. But we can also we can also cut sixes, which are still pretty good for us. They're just worth 12 points instead of 14 points if we keep the 3. So I think that all in all, it is good to keep the 8 because it allows us to improve with 7s. Now, the only other thing that's worthy of note is that by throwing away 3 king, we do give our opponent opportunities to combo with the 3 and the king by throwing away 2s. But I think that's fine. I don't think... I mean, there's a 8 king is slightly safer than 3 king, but not by a crazy margin. And an ace, normally the 8, or if we had kept the 3, the ace wouldn't have done anything, but in this case the ace does something because we have ace, 6, 8. So what do we lead here? Naturally, probably the most natural option is to lead the 9 because we have 2 9s and we don't have to, and so that means that if our opponent plays a 6 or a 9, we've got follow-ups. I think the second most natural option is to play the 6 because if our opponent plays 9, then we have another 9. But if we started off with the 9 and played the 6 and our opponent pairs the 6, we'd leave the score on 21. Opponent might just get 31 with a 10. But the thing is that if we play a 6 and our opponent pairs the 6, it's not so good for us. So it's important to stay balanced in such situations, and I think I'm just going to play the 9, and if our opponent plays a 6 on top, I'm just going to pair it and deal with the consequences there. If we start with an 8, our opponent has all of the 7s that they would have, so that means that if our opponent does play a 7, we're kind of giving away a lot of points there, because if we play a 6 or a 9, our opponent will just play the other one and get lots of points out of it, although we do have a lot of 9s, so they're less likely to have a 9. 9, 8. It's a very risky card. Opponent probably doesn't have many good options. Maybe they've got 8s and 7s, but if they had a 7, then surely you would play the 7. I'm not sure exactly what this means, but I think we can very safely play the 8 because we leave the score on 25 and our opponent can't triple our 8 and get lots of points. So let's just go 8. And they say go, which means that the rest of their hand is 7s plus. So let's see what they've got. I assume they've got a 7 at least. There's the 7 and maybe another 8. Yep. And a jack. Okay. So double 8, 7, jack for our opponent. And double run in the crib. So the 3 was, it turns out, extremely useful for our opponent there in the crib, which is one of the reasons why 8 queen is a little bit safer. But you can never get scared by these kinds of things. So 30 points apiece, and we look down at 5, 7, 8, 9, king, king. So we have 2 combos in our hand, but both of those combos are with 3 cards. So it's a little bit tough. We have to either split up the 5 king, king, or we have to split up the 7, 8, 9. Now, if we're splitting up the 5 king, king, then we're going to do that by throwing away 5 king, because it allows us to put a 5 into the crib. And if we split up the 7, 8, 9, we're going to split it up by throwing away the 7, 8, because 7, 8 is 2 points, and it allows us to make lots of runs in the crib. Okay, so what do we want to do? I think the answer is to simply throw away the 5 king, and I don't see, well, so 5 king, king, and if we throw away 7, 8, then that's worth 8 points immediately, and the 7, 8 improves. If we throw away 5 king, then that's 7 points immediately, but the 5 king improves. But I think that the 5 king doesn't improve enough to make us want to throw it away, right? Because 5 king generally improves by a little bit. It doesn't improve as much as other 5 tens, but we have to make up a whole extra point. So I think this is just 7 8. The other thing though is that our hand also improves. If we keep 7 8 9 in hand, then cutting 7s and 8s and 9s are really good for us. Also 6s. If we cut a 6, that's 8 points, and that's nothing to sneeze at. But if we cut 7s and 8s and we throw away 7 8, it's still worth a good number of points. So for that reason, I think I'm just going to throw away 7 8, and we'll see what the little computer says afterwards. Okay, opponent leads a king. Opponent leads a 10, and we've cut a 5. So it's very likely here that our opponent has 14 points in hand. 14 points is a big hand, but when your opponent leads 10s, you start to get the thinking that they might have a double run, they might have a 5 in hand, but at the very least, the 5 that's being cut is probably quite good for our opponent. So, do we want to play very safe and play something like the king right now? Or do we want to just take these 2 points that are being offered to us? And I think that I'm going to play extremely safe here, because I really want to avoid our opponent getting to the milestone. Our opponent probably has quite a big hand here, and if they don't, then we're making it to that milestone because we've got 12 points in hand, we've got 2 points in the crib, there's nothing to worry about. So why not play safe when you're sitting on a monster? Which king? I don't think it matters too much, but King of Hearts is just a little bit more safe. So 10 Jack. Our opponent does have some 9s in hand, so if we play the 9, it could get paired. But if we lead the king, then our opponent might just play a 5 on it. And I'm thinking that if our opponent does have a 9 in hand, then that is not going to score as many points in the hand as a 5 would. Because if they have a 5 left, then their hander is already worth 10 points. We've seen a 5 and a jack, and a 5's been cut. So I'm going to allow myself to give some points back to hands that contain a 9. Opponent has a 3 here, which isn't too scary. So the scariest thing is if our opponent has, I guess, a 5 or a 2 left. So playing this king is now pretty safe. Oh, they have another big card. I guess maybe it's a queen or another jack or a 10. Another 10. Makes sense. So your opponent has 8 points. Okay, 9 points with the right jack. They don't quite make it to their milestone. And it turns out that we could have taken a few more points off our opponent if we had played the 5. But I don't think it was worth the risk. Let me know what you think. So we're doing great. We're at 51. Opponent's at 41. They didn't make their milestone. And we're looking down at a hand that has a 5 with lots of 10s in. So the most natural option is to play 2 8. And the second most natural option is probably to play 8 king, or to discard 8 king. That's quite safe. And the third most natural option is probably to discard king 2. Don't think we're ever doing the king 2 option. So do we want to discard 2 8, keep all the points, or do we want to discard 8 king and be as safe as possible? Considering we're so far ahead, you might think that it's 8 king, but I don't know how much difference it makes, so I'm going to just go with the standard play, and we get paid off for that. So let's lead the king, because our opponent has fewer kings. Opponent plays a 7. This gives us a chance to offload our jack. But remember, when our opponent plays a 7 like this, it can very often be part of a magic 11, so we're walking into those. 7 ace. So 7 ace 2. Okay, that's a little strange. When you see 7 ace, it often makes you think your opponent has another 7 for the 7 ace combos. But 7 ace 2, the 2, it's hard to work into a lot of combos. Maybe they've got a 5, a 6, an 8. It's not clear. But the one thing that is clear is that if they do have a 10 left, it's not their hand isn't worth very much. So we're going to allow our opponent to get points off hands that have a 10 in them. The 7 is what they had, so they were going for the 7 ace. Unfortunately, that's not very many points for them, and they don't score very many in the crib. The 2-8 was a fine discard, and it turns out the 8 king would have been quite similar. In this case, the 8 king would have been a couple points more for them. If we have a look at the actual difference, yeah, it's about 1 point of difference, because so the crib is worth about half a point. Well, actually about 0.7 less. Maybe that's a bit optimistic, but that's the power of throwing away low cards into the crib, is that they just happen to make 15s. But we do have to sacrifice quite a lot in terms of points in our hand, so not worth it. But we are very much ahead, and this is a nice simple one for us. We've got 7, 7, 8, 9 for the double run. That's worth 12. So let's do that. And we even cut an ace, which improves our double run very slightly, but also combos with the 4 that we throw away. So if our opponent's throwing away lots of 10s, like 10 king, we're actually getting quite a good crib. What do we play here? Well, there's a few things that run through my head here. The main thought that I have at this point is it probably doesn't matter. Mostly because we're so far ahead, we're making our milestone, and we're getting lots of points in the crib. Our opponent's so far behind. I don't think we have to really spend too long. I think the main things to choose between are to keep the pair of 7s in hand, potentially for a pair of 7s at the end, or we want to play a 7 now because we know that our opponent doesn't have as many 4s because we discarded a 4. Probably the worst thing to play here is the 8, because our opponent has all the 3s, because our opponent probably has hands like 2, 3, 4. And we are slightly scared of those because an ace has been cut. So if they had a double run which involved 2, 3s and 4s, then it's been extended to a 10-point double run. And also the ace-4 combos naturally, so if they had lots of 10s left in hand, then that would suddenly be worth a lot of points. Anyway, I think that I'm just going to play the 7 because that's my gut reaction to play safe. I'm going to not play the 9 here because our opponent definitely has a lot of 10s. And I'm just going to play out the other 7 because our opponent does have another ace sometimes. Our opponent also has some 10s sometimes, which means that we can get the 8, 9, 10 combo. My opponent just has this ace 4, 5, 10, which doesn't do very much considering how many points they really need to get. Our opponent is fuming. Okay, we've got 2, 4, 7, 9, double 10. What's the play? I think the play is just to discard 7, 10. Why would we want to do that? Well, the other option is... Okay, so what are the options? Well, we've got 2 ways that we score 2 points. That's either with the pair of 10s or we keep the 2, 4, 9. And in either case, we have to split up the other combo. If we keep the double 10, then what are we going to keep with it? Either we could keep the 2 low cards, the 2, 4, or we can keep the 9 with a low card, probably by discarding 2, 7 or 4, 7. I think the 2, I'm not sure which is better. I think it's 2, 7. But the reason why we keep the 9 is because we allow ourselves to hit double runs. And that's a lot of points. And we like a lot of points. The other option is to throw away 7-10. And 7-10 is safer than throwing away 7-2 or 7-4. And it's not as powerful though because we don't leave ourselves open to hitting double runs. Instead, we have slightly more outs. We have outs like 3s that will give us a run, and of course 8s and jacks that give us runs, but not as big as the double run. The other thing that's nice about 2, 4, 9, 10 is that it's a bit more playable than keeping, say, 4, 9, 10, 10. The other thing that's worthy of note is that we could do something crazy, like throw away 2, 9, because we could keep the 4, 7 in hand for the play combo, which is the leader 4, and if our opponent pairs it, we get to play the 7 for 15. That's extremely defensive, but it does keep the 4 in hand, which is a low card, so we have outs to things like aces that would give us 6 points. So a lot of things to consider, and I don't think that it really matters too much. I'm just going to throw away the 2, 7, and we'll have a look at the end what's better. The 5 cut, generally good for the opponent. Thankfully, it doesn't combo with anything that we threw away. So let's start with, a 9. And we have to play a 10 here to avoid the runs. Why did I start with a 9 and not a 10? It's because if our opponent plays a 5 on top of our 10 and gets 2 for 15, our opponent would be holding a very strong hand more than likely because they've cut a 5. So I want to avoid giving hands that have a lot of points, extra points, because that improves our opponent's catch-up potential. Right? We're already beating strong hands that our opponent has, and by beating I mean we already have a good chance to win this game against them, so there's no point in giving them more of a chance. Opponent has double 3, so it's a little bit scary. Double 3, 2 for opponent has a 4 here. No, they have a 10. They're just getting all the points off us on the play. Okay, and a lot of points in the crib as well. Wow. Okay, so maybe there's something different we should be doing. The computer suggests play it nice and safe, throw away 7-10, because the crib is worth half a point more, but your hand doesn't improve that significantly. I think I might take a look at what Clean Brown says after this game's over. And this would be interesting to have a look at. But, overall, 2-7 is not that unsafe a discard. I think we just low rolled a bit. So as we move on to the next hand, we have to reevaluate our position and see how bad it's got. Our opponent is 13 points away from the milestone at 96, which means that we do have still a bit of a lead. We don't expect our opponent to get 13 points. We are 9 points away from our milestone, and because we're the dealer, that either means we are well ahead of the game if our opponent doesn't make it, or we're well behind if our opponent does make it. So here, it's nice to have some outs, so I'm just going to keep double 9, double 10, and I don't think we don't need to worry as much about playability when we're the dealer, because we get to react to our opponent. We do hit an 8, which is fantastic. So opponent plays an 8, clearly the 10 is safer than the 9, and actually we have a lot of 9s in hand, so hopefully our opponent doesn't just play out the 9s. Okay, opponent plays ace and 8, and what does that mean? Well, the natural thing that ace and 8 means is the opponent has 6s left. Probably we expect our opponent to have, well, if we ignore the top card, we expect our opponent to have more 8s than 6s because they led an 8. But because the top card's an 8, it means that we have to reevaluate how we think about our opponent's range a little bit more. So opponent does definitely have 8s left, and 6. They definitely have 8 sticks left in hand quite a lot of the time, and that is worth 12 points. So it's a bit scary. And in fact, a lot of the things our opponent has left to score 12 points. So we're a bit worried here. But actually, the only thing that we really need to focus on is the fact that our opponent has 6 left, and there's a possibility that our opponent has 6 ace left. So that means that if we played the 10 right now and our opponent played an ace, we would have to give away 2 points to our opponent by leading a 9. So we don't really want to do that. The things that sort of crossed my mind as I was trying to think about our opponent's range was the fact that our opponent might have hands like 7-6, or 7-6 might be left. And in that case, we are not doing so well because our opponent's hand would be worth, so that's 12 points for the double run with the 8s and 7s, and then the ace improves their hand from 12 points up to 16 points. So we're not doing too well against that hand. So anyway, just because of the 6 ace left, we have to play our 9 there. And the queen, we are really glad to see the queen here, because it means our opponent has missed a lot. So we play the 9 here to avoid getting the runs with the jacks. Opponent did have a 6 left. Opponent clearly put us on having a 9, so they avoid leading the 6. So 6 points for our opponent means that we are actually doing extremely well. But it could have not gone that way if our opponent had one of those 12-point hands, which was very likely. Okay, we are 12 points away. We are narrowing in on the goal. Our opponent is 31 points away. They have a long way to go. We're looking at 9 points in hand with the 5, 10, Jack, Queen. Sometimes that improves to 10 points with any heart. And it also improves to 12 points plus if we cut any 10 and if we cut any 5 as well. In this case, 5s would actually be huge for us because they just win us the game. There's no point, I think, considering anything else. We don't need to play that safely. If we don't make our milestone, or if we don't make the milestone, which is winning, if we don't win, then we do have another chance on the play before our opponent gets to score all of their points. We hit the 10, which means it's game over. We can play out our cards in any order. Our opponent is going to always score 1 point on the play, so we never get the skunk here. But let's just play it out in the most sensible order. Play the 5 here to avoid 21. And we allow ourselves to offload the jack. And so that means our opponent won't get to pair our queen as often as they would our jacks. And that is game over. Let's jump back to, or let's actually go online and let's have a look at that hand that we had a moment ago. But before we jump online, let's just refresh ourselves with the situation. We are currently at 81, opponent's at 57. We are well ahead of our milestone at 70. In fact, we're most of the way there to 96. We are sort of in this grey region where we are well ahead and our opponent needs to get something huge in order to catch up. We look down at 2, 4, 7, 9, 10, 10, and the question I have is it better to keep the 9, 10, 10 together, or is it better to keep the low cards, the 2 4s, in our hand? So let's find out what Clean Brown says about discarding 7, 10, or 7, 2, or 7, 4. And the other question is it better to discard 7, 2 or 7, 4? What are the differences there? One difference that I'll note is that 7, 4 is a self-blocking hand, which means that in order to make 15, you need to cut another 4 or combo it with another 4. So that means that whenever you do hit the 15, it's worth a few more points, but there are fewer ways to make that 15. So On the other hand, if you throw away 2, 7, then you can make 15 by throwing away any 6. So there are 4 6s left. That's quite a lot of ways to make 15. But you can also get those 2 points by pairing any of the numbers. So another 2 or another 7 will give you 2 points as well. So fewer points, but more frequently you get those fewer points. Whereas with the 4 7, if you do combo it with a 4, you get lots of points, but it happens less frequently. So let's find out. Let's unravel the answer. And here's the answer. So it looks like Clean Brown agrees with JD Cribbage in that 7-10 being the safer discard was on average a bit better. So if we compare the hands, if we keep 2, 4, 9, 10, then it scores an average of about 4.35, which is a little bit less than if we do keep the 9, 10, 10 together. So if we compare the pair of the top 2 rows with the next 3 rows, you can see that those are a little bit higher. However, if we check out the crib, that's really where the difference is. If we throw away 7, 10, then it's over half a point better than 4, 7, which is surprising to me. I thought that 7, 10, I know it's a safe discard, but didn't think it was that much safer than 2 7s and 4 7s. So apparently, in this case, 7, 10 is really safe. I guess one of the extra factors that makes it safer is the fact that we block some of the runs because we hold a 9. And in order to make a run through 7 and 10, you do have to get quite lucky, because you need to have both the 8 and the 9 together. Whereas if you throw away any of the low cards, then you don't really block any of the combos with the low cards. And of course, low cards make more 15. So 4, 7 is next on the... So 4, 7 is a safer discard than 2, 7. And that's probably because of the self-blocking nature. Like 2, 7 makes more points makes points more often, but when 4, 7 makes its points, it does make more points. So you can sort of see that a little bit by the difference in the standard deviation, so the second column in the crib. So standard deviation for 4, 7 is about 3.12, whereas for 2, 7 it's 3.03. So the one nice thing about discarding the low card with a 7 is that we keep the most points in hand. And in a sense, this is one of the things you do want to do when you're ahead, is you want to keep applying pressure, make sure that your opponent has to play as riskily as possible, and in order to catch up. But let's have a little look into how we achieve these scores in our hands. Let's see what the distributions look like. So we want to compare the first 2 distributions with the next 3. And as we can see, well, the reason why 2, 4 is making it into 5th place as being a reasonable discard is, I think, because of this column right here. 12 points, 8.7% of the time. And we can tell exactly why that is. That's because if you cut an 8, then you get 12 points with the massive double run. However, 2, 4 is pretty risky, and you can sort of see that some of the risk is over here in the crib. You know, you start to open yourself up to having small percentage chance of getting all these big scores. 12 happens. Okay, I've got a little bug here. 12 happens some percentage of the time. And we don't have to allow such things to happen if we throw away the safe 7, 10. As you can see, the best scores our opponent can get with 7, 10. It's about 14. and any score above 8 happens very, very little. Okay. The thing about discarding 4-7 is that you start to open up opportunities for bigger cribs, but if you blur your eyes a bit and look at the shapes of the distributions for 4-7 and 2-7, we can see that 4-7, it has a bigger bar at 0 and at 2 compared to 2-7. And so this is just saying that there are more ways for 2-7 to improve at the low end. Whereas for 4-7, there are a few ways for our opponent to improve at the high end. The hands for 4-7 and 2-7, of course, they're pretty much identical because we're mostly getting our big points whenever we cut a big card like an 8 or a jack. Whereas with 7-10, our distribution of scores is much more concentrated about the middle. We can never score more than 7 points. But we do, in return, get a lot more safety in the crib. Check out this bar. Opponent getting 2 points or 0 points. That happens around 35% of the time. And even getting 4 points or less, that's pretty much half of the time. So we can see that in the medians, which I don't have selected. Yeah. Whereas if we in the game, what we did was we threw away 2-7, and so that bumps up this median to 5, which is a little bit dangerous. I didn't think about that too much, but it's worth knowing for the future. So I hope you got something out of this. This has been the Sunday Daily Cribbage. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.